It may seem a bit early for some of y'all, except those guys way up north, but it's time to start creating a plan for our fall food plots. And that doesn't mean one plan for your whole property. You may have small plots, big plots, bottom plots, really dry ridgetop plots. It's important to evaluate each one and have a plan to maximize the 4-H production and how you're going to attract deer to that area.
Oh boy.
I know a lot of folks, including myself, are thinking about ordering seed for their fall plots, but there's some considerations besides, hey, I'm just going to order some seed. Are there a lot of weeds out there? And if there are you going to use a herbicide, maybe prescribed fire? Hopefully you're not disking, but that's an option if that's the tools you have. What are we going to do to take care of whatever vegetation's growing there, whether it's a crop or weeds right now, and how are we going to prepare to plant that fall crop? A lot of areas throughout the whitetail range have experienced a pretty significant drought this year. I know it's been 100+ degrees in western Kansas, western Oklahoma. Just got off the phone with a guy in western Georgia that talked about how dry it's been, but now there's some chances of rain. So you need to see what condition those plots are in now. If there is a heavy weed crop, we need to understand why. Whether way more deer than you had 4-H and they ate up all the good stuff and allowed weeds to grow. And it may be that it was dry all summer long and nothing grew but weeds that deer don't like to eat. Remember, where sunshine's hitting the ground, something is going to grow unless there's absolutely no moisture. It's going to grow. You see this on a dirt pile, maybe besides where a house is being built. It's not long before weeds start growing. There's weed seeds everywhere. So if you didn't have a good enough crop, maybe you planted a monoculture or a single species, and that let weeds come through there because there wasn't different leaf sizes or different heights of different plants to capture all the sun. It's gonna happen again in your fall crop. That's one reason I really love blends. You've got plants at different heights and different leaf sizes, with the goal of intercepting all the sun so it doesn't get to the soil and stimulate the growth of those weed seeds. One of the best tools, I actually think it should be a law. That's how important it is. If you're planting a food plot, you should have a utilization cage out there. And recently, I was helping a gentleman in Maryland. It's kind of one of his first attempts having big food plots. He had a lot of weeds out there, so he planted a Roundup Ready soybean to make sure he could spray over the top of those beans and get on top of the weeds this first year, hopefully swap to a blend later on. In these bigger fields, every single bean in the entire field was consumed except what was in his utilization cages. Did that happen at your place? Please put a cage out there so you're not guessing. You may be thinking, well, it was too dry or the seed was no good, but you don't know unless there was a cage in each plot. If you found out your crop only exists inside the cage, or it's 3 foot tall in the cage and lip high outside the cage, that's a really good indicator you need to plant something else or plant more seeds. Maybe you planted 30 pounds per acre and you should have planted 60, just being facetious here. And let's not forget the number of mouths competing for the 4-H is a big factor, and it likely means you need to increase that doe harvest. Harvesting more bucks doesn't limit a population's growth. And when deer herds are healthy, cooking on all 8 cylinders, they can increase by about 1/3 a year. And there's lots of variables in here, but let's call it 1/3. Well, if you had 100 deer and you miss your doe harvest one year, you could have 130 deer next year. And if they're already eating your food plots lip high, it's not going to get any better. And we know, statistically speaking, most states, hunters in most states, are not harvesting enough does. There's certainly some areas that are an exception to that. And I know here at the Proving Grounds too, we're gonna increase our doe harvest, or try to, over what we harvested last year. We know how many we harvested last year, and due to drought and other factors, our food plots have taken a beating, or at least some of them have. And so we know, well, harvesting that many does last year didn't fix the issue. We need to increase that harvest for this year. If there is a heavy weed crop, you may want to use a herbicide or something to keep those weeds from making seed. Of course, there's some guys that want to disc, and that may be your only option, but remember, disking is going to cause whatever moisture is in the soil to go away. Disking should be the very last option on your list. Disking not only causes soil to lose whatever moisture is in there, but it always creates a compaction layer right below where that disc is loosening the soil. I think it fakes some of us out. We see the disc fluffing up soil, but we fail to realize that as that tractor is pulling the disc, it's actually making that disc go a bit deeper. It's transferring some of the weight to the disc. We've shown this before. And right below that thin disc, it's really compacting the soil. And that matters because when that new plant makes roots big enough, it's trying to get deeper in the soil to find that moisture that's available deeper on and the nutrients that are deeper in the soil. That hard pan will stop that root, and it does what we call J-rooting. It will hit and turn sideways. We see this over and over. We go into food plots, pull up plants, and those roots are just going horizontal to the surface of the soil. They're not able to penetrate that hard pan created by disking. Herbicide, as nasty as they sound, do less damage than disking, churning up that soil, exposing it to the sun, likely having some wind and water erosion. Herbicide's a better option, but you need to think about what you're going to spray. By far the most common herbicide used worldwide in a food plot setting is glyphosate. That's the active ingredient in Roundup. And a lot of food plotters will use about 2%. Now that's not 2% on the jug. That means, just for easy math, if your sprayer handles 100 gallons, you would put 2 gallons of glyphosate in there, and of course mix it up, do all the right stuff. So 2%, glyphosate's always sold at 40+% active ingredient, and you're gonna want 2% of the total solution to be glyphosate. So again, if your sprayer is a 100-gallon tank, you're gonna put 98 gallons of water in there and 2 gallons of glyphosate. You may have some weeds like mare's tail or pigweed that are Roundup or glyphosate resistant, and those plants just grow a bit more. So you need to be able to identify the weeds in your plot. You may not know them all, but there are many apps anymore. iNature, picture this. You can put on your phone, simply take a picture, and it will identify the plant rapidly. As long as there's cell signal in your area, there's really no excuse to not be able to identify the plants. Maybe your plots did great, except right next to the wood line or somewhere like that where there's a lot of browse pressure, and that area got some weeds. Don't think you got to spray the entire plot. Maybe you're just treating that small area with some herbicide to keep those weeds from making a bunch of seed and spreading in years to come. We often use prescribed fire as an option to prepare a seed bed. This is typical on our smaller plots. Deer browse on them heavily, or there's a lot of duff in there, and we're afraid if we broadcast, we won't get good seed to soil contact. About August, we're gonna start planting August 15th or later, depending on the rain. So it's hot and dry, usually late July, early August. We simply take a backpack blower. We got some big steel backpack blowers. Blow around the edge, usually in the timber where there's just leaves. It's okay to burn a few yards, going toward the timber, clean that up a little bit too. Blow a line around there. A fire break is simply where there's no fuel. These are small fires. 1 or 2 guys can do it easily. And then slowly burn that off. That will consume a lot of that duff. Now it's gonna turn the ground black. It's gonna make it really hot. That can kill some of the beneficial microbes. That's not good. But it's a way to clean that off, kill any of the existing weeds without using a herbicide, and then wait till right before rain and broadcast the seed. Don't broadcast the seed a week before rain on that black surface area. It's gonna get 120, 150 degrees with the sun's energy on there, and that will kill the germination of the seeds. Another reason not to broadcast too early is you will be amazed at how many seeds birds and rodents can remove. It is shocking. You see squirrels running out, cheeks just full, back and forth all day long, storing those for the winter, and all of a sudden your food plot seed is in the ground or in a tree cavity back in the timber several yards. It's also a viable tool for larger plots. We did that last year, worked out good. I will share with you, if grasses are your issue, you've got, perennial grasses, maybe crabgrass or something like that, and you burn that off, that's gonna top kill the grasses, but probably not kill it all the way. And in that case, it's it's gonna be better to use herbicide or a combination of herbicide and prescribed fire.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
If you've got a good plot, I would go right into planting. Unless it's so thick, there's not many deer in your area, this is rarely an issue. You know, that plot's 4 feet tall and just dog hair thick. I'm gonna run a drill through there, and depending on the species, the drill should knock down enough of that crop to get enough sun to the ground to allow those new seedlings to germinate and grow. The seed will germinate. It'll germinate in a dark environment. But if there's not sunshine getting those new leaves so that little seedling can photosynthesize, it's gonna starve to death and die. That's why in the spring, I never want people planting in a thick, lush clover stand, because that clover will take most of the sunshine up and the seed will starve to death. The seedling will starve to death. That's rarely the case in the fall. And a good rule of thumb is if you can walk through your field and see your boots about half the time, there's enough sun getting to the ground for that new crop to photosynthesize and grow. And depending on the model drill you have, some drills do more damage than others. I used a pH drill. It doesn't do that much damage. So if I've got a really thick crop, I may need to do something like crimping after I've drilled to allow more sun to get to the ground and that crop to grow. And by the way, crimping doesn't put more sun on the ground if there's a thick crop, but that seed will have enough energy for the seedling to get 3 or 4 inches tall, reach through that mulch, make leaves photosynthesize, and take off running. If your crop's really green and it's not in the dough stage yet, then crimping's gonna lay it down, but a lot of it will stand back up. One of my favorite techniques people know is broadcasting. Just walking, planting makes me really connected with the land. Ideal for smaller plots. You can do bigger plots. It's hard to make sure you're getting even coverage on a big plot, because I'm usually looking around seeing stuff. What I do is focus on a tree or whatever fence post across the plot, walk straight, turn around, go a few yards over, pick out another thing and walk to it. I've even set 5-gallon buckets down as my target to walk through, and each time I move it over the appropriate distance, depending on how far my broadcaster is spreading seed. If the crop has been browsed pretty good, but there's no weed pressure, broadcasting by hand or with a tractor can be a great tool. Again, we want the seed to make contact with the soil. If it's held up on a layer of duff, it'll get warm and wet and grow, but it may not get a root in the ground in time to support that seedling, and that plant could die. These are just some strategies we've used successfully through the years, depending upon the current status of the food plot. It's important to go spend some time, boots on the ground, see your food plot crops so you know the techniques you need to use and how much seed you need. I was just in Texas working with some landowners. The question come up, well, maybe they had some food plots that weren't doing too good. Maybe deer ate them all. Well, when you plant a really heavy blend, maybe it calls for 10 pounds per acre and you plant 15 pounds per acre, that 15 pounds or 10 pounds is when the crop is mature and there's a lot of competition. We're planting these crops for deer to browse on them throughout the season. So if you plant kind of the bottom level of that crop, smallest pounds per acre, and deer browse on it, by the time it matures, that crop's gonna be really thin, not enough groceries, and weeds are gonna grow. I often plant 20 to 50% or more seed than recommended by the company you purchase the seed from. Of course, I work with Green Cover Seed, get all my seed from them. They're a great big farming unit. They're not food plot people. They sell millions of acres worth of cover crop seed, so it's always fresh, and they do all this testing. They're doing it right. They're not a small food plot company. And you can talk to Colton there and one of the other guys there, and they will give you good suggestions of what, how much, and when to plant. I know I'm gonna be planting the Super Fall blend in a lot of my plots. Super Fall's built for those of us like me that have a limited number of food plots and probably a few too many deer. It's got a lot of seed per acre in that blend. And then I'm bumping that up about 20% more I want it dog ear thick when it's, this tall, so when deer browse on it in late winter, it's still thick enough to get me enough groceries to make sure my deer are going through the winter in really good body condition. Man, planting food plots is a really good way to enjoy creation and understand more about the Creator. Life and multiplying the efforts, that was Christ. Seed dies, that's Christ being crucified, buried, and resurrected. That's that new seed coming out of the ground. I don't know of a better illustration of the life, death, and resurrection of Christ than harvesting seed, getting seed, planting seed, and watching them come to life. And I hope you enjoy that process, have successful crops, and even more importantly, that you take time every day to be quiet and seek the Creator's will for your life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.